We are joined now by the radio play-by-play voice of your Florida Panthers, Doug Plagens. Doug, thank you for joining us. First of all, I think it was ESPN the other night during a Panthers broadcast. They were playing your call along with Bill Lindsay. The final seconds of that Stanley Cup victory. It just brings back so many memories, so many emotions. And so you remember during this time, I guess, just the grind. You're reminded of the grind it took to get there. It wasn't all celebration. There were moments like this in the season last year, even. So I take it you're not concerned that we are seeing more losses than wins these days.
Well, it's been a little back and forth lately, and thanks so much for having me. And it does make you think about the fact that it is a process here and it is a grind. And at the same time, I think everybody needs to look at the big picture and keep that in mind. I've been mentioning that a lot. But after what the Panthers accomplished last year, after getting to the Cup final the year before that, they've had some short off seasons. They came into this year, picked up right where they left off, considering how much hockey this team's played, how much they've accomplished, and considering, again, it's a grind of a schedule. If somebody had come to you after the Panthers had less than 3 months between Game 7 and the start of the preseason and said, hey, by the end of January, you're going to be in second in the division, breathing right down Toronto's neck with a chance to make a run at the top spot in the Atlantic. I think anybody, considering how difficult this league is and how tightly contested it is and how much competitive balance there is, I think anybody would have taken that. This Panthers team's right in the hunt. They're a contender, and something we've talked about quite a bit, and Paul Maurice has mentioned as well. They've been in a grind of a schedule, not just this last month or so, but really from the time the season started. They went to Finland. They're on the West Coast right now. Keep in mind, just like last year, by the time this part of the schedule is over with, by the time this Western swing is over with, the Panthers aren't going to have to deal with trips to the Mountain and Pacific time zones anymore. That could play into their hands down the road, just like I think it did during the playoff race last year. But Paul Maurice has mentioned it. We've looked at it during grinds in the schedule like this a lot of times. This is where teams, good teams, contending teams, take steps, where they grow, where they find their game. We've seen it a lot over the course of the last couple of seasons with this Panthers team en route to those deep playoff runs. This is all just part of the process. And looking at their most recent game against the LA Kings, that's another team that is playoff bound, that has high aspirations. Crypto.com Arena is a tough building for anybody to go into. Doesn't matter what sport you're playing. It's a lively environment all the time. And they were in it right until the end, in the second end of a back-to-back. It was a hard-fought game, two good teams, and the Panthers will have a chance at them again coming up in their next home game on the 29th.
Yeah, the good news is, I mean, they've split the road, the West Coast trip so far, 5-2 win, I believe, over Anaheim, 2-1 in LA, went right to the end. We've seen, guys we're used to seeing score a lot last year, like Carter Verhaeghe and Sam Bennett. We've seen them go through kind of ruts here this season. Is this a case of the team being fundamentally different? I know we've seen some line changes and stuff like that. Or is this just a matter of what players go through in a given season? We're hyper focusing on this because we're the Stanley Cup champions. Are there some fundamental changes going on, philosophies with this team in 2025?
No, this team knows how it has to play. And if you look at, I know a lot of times this may not be something that amuses everyone, but the underlying numbers, a lot of those fancy stats, they're all where they should be. And if you look at where this team is as a team, that the expected goals, a lot of those underlying offensive numbers, they're in a good spot. A lot of the underlying defensive numbers, they're where you'd like to see them. It's a case of, especially when you have a veteran team that knows what the game needs to look like every single night, over the course of a season, all those numbers, whether it be team numbers, individual numbers, they're all going to balance out. It's a long season. I always tell people to keep the 82 game frame in mind because there's a lot that can, there's a lot that can happen over the course of 82 games. By the end of this thing, everything is going to look the way that it's supposed to. 82 game grinds involve ups and downs, but I think that's been the biggest thing that the Panthers have stressed and that Paul Maurice has talked about a lot, not just this year, but going back to his first season. What he wants this team to do is find a game every night that they like, that they can replicate night to night, that they know works, and they have that. They know what it looks like. And over the course of this last month or so, I know they've had some wins, they've had some losses, but overall, Paul Maurice likes the way that his team has looked much more often than not. He knows they're playing a game that they can duplicate night to night that is going to give them a chance to win on most nights. And at this point in the season, that's really what it's all about for this team because you know this team's going to be playoff bound and you know they're going to be a contender once again.
Yeah, it almost sounded like Coach Maurice was taking the moral victory in LA. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he did say this is a defense. These are the type of defenses, this type of defensive effort towards us is what we have to get used to over the next few months. And the fact that they were able to keep it, a game right down to the end. Spencer Knight looked great in net again. He sees the positive there. That's what it sounds like anyway.
Well, you have to look for the positive every single night, and he'll be the first one to say nobody wants to lose games. That's not what it's all about. But when you have a veteran team that knows what it takes, that's seen quote unquote the model, what it needs to look like every single night, this team's getting itself into a good spot, and the stretch run's going to be big. And this is a big part of the schedule too, leading up to the Four Nations face-off. Because once you get to the Four Nations face-off, sure, the Panthers are going to have 8 guys who are going to play in that. That's more than any other team in the National Hockey League has. But they're also going to have over half of their regulars who are going to get a chance to catch their breath. And that could be valuable down the stretch for this team. So that's why this is a big part of the schedule, kind of a sprint to the Four Nations face-off. Those guys could play a handful of games over there depending on what kind of success their teams have. And I know the guys are looking forward to that a lot. But after that, you're going to have a lot of guys who are also going to be pretty fresh coming out of it.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that though too, because you just touched on it a little bit. But winning the Stanley Cup, 2 straight years, going all the way to the final, and only having 2 months off in the off season, you almost don't want that scenario of having all your stars playing in what is a fantastic idea, the Four Nations Cup. You almost would want them to maybe all get a breather, but that's not going to be the case. It's just another challenge for the Panthers in being an elite team the way they are, right?
It is one of those things, one of the prices that you pay for success, and the fact that the Panthers do have a lot of really good international players. And for these players, I know they're all really looking forward to representing their countries. The Panthers are obviously going to have 4 players playing for Team Finland. So I know a lot of folks are going to be paying attention to Team Finland with Barkov and Lundell and Eetu Luostarinen, Nico Mikkola representing the Panthers on that team. But of course, you're going to have Matthew Tkachuk playing in the tournament. Sam Reinhart, Sam Bennett, they're going to be playing in it. Gus Forsling's going to be playing for Team Sweden in the tournament. So there's going to be a huge Panthers interest in that tournament. And it is going to be fun to see a best on best. And it'll kind of be an appetizer in a sense for when we get to see the true best on best at the Olympics the following year. So I know it's going to get a lot of people excited for that. And it's going to have a lot of those national teams also looking at this tournament and, starting to make decisions on how they want their roster to look when the Olympics do come around the following year. So it's just another aspect to all this. And like you said, when you're a good team, when you have a lot of good players on your team, when it comes time for these kind of tournaments and these kind of events, you're going to be well represented on those rosters.
Yeah, just world recognition. Of course, the Winter Classic is going to be coming up next year. Have you noticed changes? I forget how many years this has been for you as the radio play-by-play voice. Has it been 6 years? Am I right there?
This is my 10th.
10. Okay, so time flies by. My kids are growing like weeds. You've been there a decade. What have you noticed this year that's just a little bit different after winning the Stanley Cup that maybe, on the road or just with the maybe like interview requests that you're getting and stuff like that? Do you notice, have they gone over into another side of another realm of being recognized?
Well, it's interesting because with any sort of success comes additional buzz. And we've noticed that in the marketplace. And you certainly have seen it this year, but I think it's been a build over the course of the last few years. The Panthers have established themselves as a perennial playoff team. And really, going back the last handful of years, the expectation has been that this Panthers team is going to be in the playoffs and they're going to be in a position to make some noise when they get there. And I think going back to the 23 playoffs when the Panthers ultimately were upended by Vegas in that Stanley Cup final. I think even that year, the increase in the number of car flags that you saw out driving around. You'd hear casual conversations when you walked into restaurants and things, people talking about the Panthers.
Well,
You
hey,
would
look, there's
see.
there's Doug Plagens right there.
Well,
Look
I,
at him.
I don't know that it's gotten that far just yet, but you'd hear people talking about the team. You'd see a lot more people wearing the gear. Obviously, the numbers to back it up in terms of the attendance and everything like that, and ticket sales figures, and TV ratings and everything like that, and the number of games on national TV for the Panthers. That's something that's risen over the last handful of years. So again, we've noticed it this year, but it's been a gradual build going back the last few seasons. I can't even tell you how excited it makes us, because at the end of the day, we want everybody to be as excited about the team. I always say, I hope everybody's just as excited about the team as I am. I hope everybody enjoys the broadcast as much as I enjoy doing the broadcast. And for the Panthers overall, these last few seasons, we've seen the buzz. We see it on the road, and it's not just fans in other buildings. You can tell that teams the Panthers are playing against, not just this year, but going back the last couple of years, the Panthers are an opponent that's circled on other teams' schedules now because they're a two-time defending Eastern Conference champion. They are the defending Stanley Cup champion. Anytime that team goes to town, it's going to be an important date on the schedule. It doesn't matter where you're going. So the Panthers are a measuring stick team for the opposition, and we can tell that there's been a great pickup in the buzz in the marketplace these last few years. And I tell you what, the core players are all locked in. Bill Zito's done a great job with the roster. Barkov signed long-term, Kachuk signed long-term, Sam Reinhart, Gus Forsling, Anton Lundell. So many of these key core players are locked in. Fans can get used to these guys. They can get used to having them around. And it's going to be just one reason why this team is going to be in the contending mix for a number of years to come. This isn't just going to be a short-term thing. You can expect the Panthers to be good for a while.
So exciting. I love the way you guys put out on social media your calls, your goal calls. I know you and the Panthers do a great job of that. It really hypes you up. If you don't have a morning coffee, just put that on in the car after a win, and it'll get you going for the day. I just want to tee up the San Jose game. I guess the one good thing about the Panthers is they were taking too many penalties, I think, early on in 2025. That was kind of burning them because they're so good when they're 5-on-5. They've cleaned that up, it seems, quite a bit. You see it more than I do. You're watching every second of it. It was good to see a power play goal the other night. Is that sort of balancing out now? What was that you saw as far as penalties early on in the season or early
Yeah,
on in the year?
I think it's just one of those ebbs and flows things over the course of a season. The Panthers are a good special teams team. If they get into those kind of situations, they know how to handle it. But as you said, they are a top tier 5-on-5 team in the National Hockey League, and especially going in against a team in San Jose, who, again, folks, I know that the San Jose Sharks, they aren't in the standings where we remember them being, a decade or so ago, and they were a contender for the Stanley Cup every single year, but they're on their way, and it's a challenging game. They're a team that's going to make you bring it every single night, but they've got a lot of exciting building blocks. And if you're watching the game on Saturday night, we always obviously we love watching the Panthers, but you love watching some of the great talent across this league too. And the top pick in the draft last year, Macklin Celebrini, has a chance to be a really special player for the San Jose Sharks. So when you're watching the game come Saturday night, that's just a guy to keep an eye on. But it's a challenging back-to-back on tap here for the Panthers. You've got the game in San Jose on Saturday night, and then it's right off to Vegas to wrap up this road trip on Sunday. So the Panthers have been good in the back-to-backs. They've been really good against teams that they have a playoff history against the last couple of years. So again, that certainly highlights the game Sunday evening in Vegas. But first order of business, this one in San Jose, like you said, if the Panthers keep the game 5-on-5, you certainly like their chances. The experience could take over in a game like that. They have a win over San Jose under their belts from earlier in the year. And again, we'll see what goaltender the Panthers get against them. But San Jose's got a pretty exciting exciting young goaltender in Yaroslav Askarov as well. That's going to be a guy that I think a lot of hockey fans, just people who love the game are going to have fun watching over the course of the next number of years. But again, a tough matchup coming up against the San Jose Sharks. Don't let the record fool you. But from the Panthers' perspective, these are games that, especially with them right in the thick of that race for the top spot in the Atlantic, these are games that you want to make sure that you get. So a big game coming up on Saturday night when the Panthers head into the Shark Tank.
Hey, just before you go, I can imagine perhaps maybe you can put some insight on this. Spencer Knight's probably going to play in one of those games between the pipes, right? Would that be your guess?
In a back-to-back, you generally see both goaltenders, so pretty safe.
And so, how impressed are you lately? I mean, Bobrovsky's Bobrovsky, but we've seen some great things from, like, the national anthem. Everyone loves to shut out Knight. He wasn't there for a while, but he is back big time. He's really impressing me in the games I've seen with him in net.
Yeah, Spencer Knight's been really good, and like you said, in a back-to-back situation, you generally do see both goaltenders, and that's how they've liked to play this over the course of the year. Sergei Bobrovsky, he's the reliable veteran. He's going to be ready to go every single night. Spencer Knight, again, after valuable experience last year, went down to Charlotte in the American Hockey League with the goal of going and experiencing being a number one, and that's what he did, and he had a really good season and especially a really good second half last year for the American Hockey League affiliate in Charlotte. He's come right into this year and he's really been able to build his game. And I know last night, at the time we're having this conversation, last night in Los Angeles, he was kind of the tough luck losing goaltender in that one, even though he played really well, came up on the short end of a 2-1 final score. It was his first loss in the 2025 calendar year, had won his previous 3 starts going into that one. A couple of shootout wins for him recently too, where he's really been able to show his stuff. But he's again, you see his game really evolving. It's easy to forget how young Spencer Knight still is, and goaltenders in the National Hockey League, that's a tough position to master. I'm not sure even the best goaltenders to ever play the game have ever truly mastered the position. It's so difficult, and he's still, in terms of goalie prime, he's still got years before he would reach what you'd conventionally say would be the prime years for a goaltender. So he's still very much building his game. And since he's come in, since he was drafted, you always heard about, the maturity beyond his years and the fundamental soundness that he plays with and the command of the position. And the game against LA, even though the Panthers lost that game, it was a prime example of it. I mentioned it during the broadcast. You never see any wasted movement from Spencer Knight. He's so positionally sound, and I thought that was what he showed during the game against LA. That's what he's had lately. He's been really good for the Panthers, and this team's been able to rely on goaltending as a strength over these last couple of seasons, whether it be Sergei Bobrovsky and Anthony Stolarz last season, who had a great year in that kind of backup role. This year, Spencer Knight going back and forth with Bobrovsky. It's been great to see. It's been a strength of this team, and as you know, if you're going to make a deep playoff run, you need multiple goaltenders on your organizational depth chart that you can rely on to get you a victory, and that's what the Panthers have. It's a great spot for them to be in. They've got a condensed schedule the rest of the way too. They have a lot of back-to-backs coming up. There still is a good deal of travel. They're going to need both guys, and fortunately, they've got 2 guys who can give them a chance to win every single night.
When you said deep playoff run, the hair in the back of my neck stood up again. So yeah, thanks. You've been more than generous with your time, Doug Plagens. Remind me where people can listen to the Panthers games here in Palm Beach County.
So up in Palm Beach County, and you can check your local listings, but just about every game is on not only 1230 The Gambler on your AM dial, but also Real Radio 92.1 on your FM dial. So on most nights, you have 2 places you can find the Panthers. If they're not on 1230, they're probably over on Real Radio 92.1 on the FM dial and vice versa. But most nights you can find them in both places. You can find them on the station websites too. And if you aren't sure, if you just want to take all the guesswork out of it, download the Panthers app. It's free. There's a button in the top right corner that says radio. And if you hit that, you'll get the game anywhere across the United States that you might be. So
yeah, the NHL app, Sirius. I just asked, my Alexa, hey, play Florida Panthers on Sirius XM. And there's Doug Plagens right there.
So there's a little tip too. A lot of people, if you're a Sirius XM subscriber, you may not even know that you have the Sirius XM app, but you do. And every Major League Sports team has a dedicated channel on the SiriusXM app, the Panthers have channel 931. And if you go to channel 931 on that app, it's always going to be the Panthers game. It's always going to be the Panthers broadcast. It's always going to be us. So that's just one of the many ways you can find the Panthers on your just many multitude of platforms.
Just wanted to make sure people could get their Doug Plagens fix and their Panthers fix. And thank you for giving us ours. Looking forward to the rest of the season. Have a good trip out there on the West Coast.
Thanks so much for having me, John.
Thanks, Doug.